Hey, it's Jason from Fraser Valley Rose Farm, and today I'm taking a tour with Kama from $3 Dahlias. This is the coolest place, an urban flower farm that specializes in dahlias right from the front yard in a street in Mission. I got a chance to catch up with her because she's taking down her dahlias for the season, and so I wanted to have a look at how she's taking them out of the beds, how she's processing and storing these for the winter. I thought that might be of some interest to you. Let's talk about the setup here for a second, if you don't mind. Are there challenges related to running a dahlia farm right out of your front yard?
Space, definitely. When you're putting in the tubers too, and now it comes time to lift them, and we have things like the edges of the planters in different locations, trying to get around them and lift them and do that is a challenge for sure. And you can always have more room to plant more flowers. I think most dahlia enthusiasts, we want more and more and more. So we have to limit that a bit, and I have to be choosy about what's most productive, what does well for me. I love to make bouquets, so a big part of what gets to stay now is whether or not it performs well in a bouquet, if it produces lots of nice flowers, if I love the color, and I can make good use out of it. So a lot get cut every year. And really good thing about gardening in an area like this has been how much I've gotten to meet people in the community. That's been my favorite thing, and definitely the best thing about it is so many people, I know who they are now, and they come by regularly, pick stuff up, pick up tubers in the spring, and it's just a really fun way to get involved with the community.
Okay, so you sell bouquets, you sell the tubers, and I'd imagine you, in a location like this, because we're right on a main road in Mission, your advertising probably consists a little bit of just letting people see that you're here.
Absolutely, and then walking by, sometimes people end up at the front door. I don't put stuff out for sale a lot. It's with the bouquets, it's pretty much all by order. I struggle with putting it out because it's often too hot, or what if it starts to rain and the product isn't great. It doesn't last as long as I'd like it to. I'd like people to get something that they're really going to enjoy and is of value to them. So I don't do a lot of that. The other thing is major area. Some of those bouquets I put out do just walk away. Introduce me to some of your tools here. You've got your scissors. Yes, so main thing that through the cutting season, right now we're going to be looking at digging, so that's going to be a little different, but is sterilizing the tools as we go. Every single plant when I switch, even if it's an annual, if I'm cutting in one of the beds with zinnias and then I switch over to a dahlia, the tools get cleaned in between, because unfortunately with dahlias there is a lot of issues with diseases and viruses as well, and I want to be able to sleep well in the winter knowing that I've done everything I can to keep things clean. So this is a 10% bleach and water solution, so pretty simple to make. One thing to think about when you're making it though is that bleach doesn't keep forever, so don't pull that bottle of bleach out of the back of your laundry room that's been sitting there for 2 years and think you have something to sterilize. Get a fresh one. There's even can be dates on them. Some people don't like to use the bleach. There is a Dawn, blue Dawn solution that you can make up. The drawback to the bleach is the rusting of the tools. However, I find that these ones out of the kitchen section at the dollar store, how they come apart like this so they can dry. Yeah, there's a bit of rust, but they're still very functional. They don't really cost me a ton of money, so for proper sterilization and a bit of an investment over the year, I don't mind so much. Also, I've recently discovered you can soak your tools in vinegar to help break down the rust on them, so that can help prolong the use of them as well. When we're getting into dividing the tubers as well, I like to use pruners that are like not the bypass. The bypass are the ones like a regular scissor, but these ones cut down like a kind of like a little knife instead. Yeah. The way they're levered. What I like about that is they cut exactly where I think they're going to cut. They don't kind of twist as you're coming down, and as I find the bypass will do, but this is sort of like a scissor into the tuber. A little bit of power tools sometimes, a Dremel multi-tool.
And what do you use that for?
This is for getting into those really big, thick dahlia tubers when you want to get into the center, break it apart. This works for you well. Again, that has to be clean though. I just got a new one. Another tool for dividing, a lot of people like the Zenport scissors. These ones are a lot more prone to rusting though. But again, into some vinegar, give them a wipe and they're okay. And This is for my non-cutting hand, my hand that's holding things. Jason probably remembers last year I cut myself pretty good before I started using this with my sharp scissors. So this goes onto my hand. Cleaning for this, I use the Dawn dish soap.
So it's like chainmail armor for your hand.
It is, and you only need it on the one side.
Must be tough to make that call that it's time to start bringing things up, and I know you have quite a lot here, so you have to work through it.
Absolutely.
So how do you make that call? What is your trigger for starting to dig up your dahlias?
Well, for me, as you said, I only have so much time to dedicate each week as I'm going through them. So last year I left it a little bit later and started more towards the end of October. We did get a frost around the end of October, I believe, as well, and I did find that there was already some damage from too much moisture on some of the dahlias. The ones in the barrels were removed first because those are going to be the most likely to have issues. Ones in barrels, pots. I'm working through the raised planters. The ones in the ground will stay to the last because they can usually take the most.
So that's an interesting point, that in our climate, because we're quite wet.
It's so wet.
So you could end up, if you wait until frost, you could end up with some pretty mushy stuff.
Today I was cutting one of them and I cut into the stalk and water just gushed out. And I hadn't cut it previously, like I'm not even sure, there was a little hole somewhere. It was full of water. So that water is then going to be slowly seeping down into the crown of the dahlias and can lead to rot. So here's a small tuber clump that I cut up earlier, or lifted earlier today. This variety I've grown for a few years now, and it never makes a ton of tubers, but the nice thing about it is they're really easy to divide because it's sort of a neat and tidy one. It's called Bloomquist Jean, and it's a beautiful flower. So when we get into dividing, we want to make sure that each tuber that we divide has a body, a neck, and a crown. We're going to go for this one here.
Okay, and what you had to do on that first is you obviously had to lop off the top. Yeah?
I did, yeah, cut it down. Some people cut them down and leave them for a while, and that will help with the development of the eyes. And the eyes on the tuber are basically the sprouts that are going to turn into your plant for next year. That works well for them. I think that a good idea, if you're going to take them down and leave them for a while, is to cover this area so it doesn't get too saturated. If you're going to leave them for a week or two, or sometimes light gets away on you. So people will take little tin foil and put it over top to protect them, or you could even throw a tarp over a bed, or if you have that option as well. I personally like to take them down, take them up, divide them, get them dry and put them away. It doesn't mean that I have as much of able to see the eyes to work with, but I just leave a hunk of the crown, and it usually works out for me all right in the spring. So when I am lifting, I don't use a shovel typically. You want to come around and give a little bit of a movement to the clump from all different directions here, if you can. This is where having the things in the way makes it trickier. It's a real feat when I'm taking them out of those raised beds. And again, because the plants are quite close together, because I like to grow as many as I can pretty much, I have to watch out for its neighbor. So you don't want to grab onto here and just lift. I can tell it's getting pretty loose right now, but the issue being that this it's got a lot of dirt on top of it, and it's heavy. It was raining this morning. This soil is heavy and wet, so I've got a chance of breaking more things than I'd like to, for sure, if I just start pulling on it and have all that weight on the top. So I'm gonna literally try to get underneath of it and bring it up that way.
Right, and the risk of you introduce any breakage into it is that, of course, that's an opening for any disease or rot or anything else.
And most of the time when you break the tuber, it's going to break at its neck, and then it's not going to be attached to its crown, and it's just garbage. So you're down a little guy for next year.
Yeah, and just for not having the patience to dig off some of that extra soil and shake it loose. Yeah.
So some people store them with the dirt still on and they don't hose them, and that provides a great level of protection. Before I was as into it as I am now, I used to just take my clumps out, let them dry a bit, hit some more dirt off of them, put them on racks in the garage, and lo and behold, a lot of them still grew the next spring. It wasn't that big a deal. But now that, as I said, I'm investing more into them and more concerned with production for the next year, put more effort in. But it's not to say that that doesn't work. So now that I got this clump and I've kind of gotten some of the dirt off, I'm going to hose it. If I can, I hose it in the spot where it was growing, so that I'm not moving any bacteria or disease or anything around the garden. So this is a good example of why I do like to clean the dahlias up in the fall. This was the mother tuber right here, and you can see it's rotted. And that is not uncommon. At some point, this plant I know in particular, it went out super early in the season as well. But all of that, if I was to just leave that in a clump and have not cleaned it up, I would have left all that rotten material behind. And that might have increased my chances of not having this one work out for spring. So make sure that you label everything. We didn't talk about that. Before frost, you want to go around and make sure it's some way that you have them all tagged with what they are, so that when they all just turn to black if you're waiting for frost, or if a frost surprises you, you know which ones you have.
Right, harder to ID them once they're mush.
Once they're all mush, that's no good. So we're starting off by just taking off the wispy bits. Now, anything thinner than a pencil, it's kind of the rule of thumb, is not going to keep over the winter. So you're better off just to let it go. So I'm taking off all the wispy bits of roots and anything that's particularly small, getting it out of the way. So here we can see what we refer to as the mother tuber. So you can even see it's got some writing on it still from last year.
Right.
So this one looks healthy enough, but it's done its job, so I'm still not going to keep it. But if you had really poor tuber production and maybe that was the only thing left and you really wanted to try to grow that variety again, by all means you could keep it for another year.
Right, and it's old and tough and dark colored and at the bottom. So
yeah.
You kind of, having put it in yourself, you know that's the mother tuber.
Yeah, they often look a lot darker. Like we saw that other one earlier, it had rot. I'll cut this one like this so we can see. Sometimes too, and not with this one, but sometimes when you cut here, you'll notice that it's starting to rot up through the center as well.
Okay.
So if you were to not want to divide any further, that would be fine. You'd remove the stalk up here and you could just store it like that as is. But I do recommend tidying it up, taking a look for anything that's rotten, because even one of the other new tubers could have rotted. So taking that time. I'm working on top of some parchment paper here. It just doesn't make sense to wipe the surface every single time with a couple hundred tubers, and things are messy out here. So a clean piece of parchment paper for each one is what I've found to work. Newspaper gets pretty wet and soggy pretty fast. So this is a really small tuber. It's skinny is what concerns me. This variety does make fairly skinny ones. This one might survive storage. I might even give it a little extra babying, and it also might not. So what I'm doing here is I'm looking for the crown. Actually, you can see on this one here, that little paler spot, that's an eye. That's a little bit of growth, a little sprout for next year. We can see one right here as well. So if I had cut it down and made it think, hey, I don't have a plant anymore, I need to make more sprouts, that's what will stimulate it to make a whole bunch of eyes. And some people like that. It helps them feel more confident when they are dividing, which I understand. But I just kind of instead leave as much crown as I can. This area that comes from the neck and attaches to the stalk, just leave a bunch of that area.
You can see on some of these, there's kind of a very distinctive collar where they join the crown, and I guess that's what you're sort of benchmarking when you're making that division, eh?
Yeah, making sure that a section of that gets left. And as you go and you cut into the stalk even, you see that this has a different texture to it. So when you're getting down into these pieces here, you can cut into that stalk a bit if you like. You can see right there though, that's going to become an eye in the spring.
Right.
These scissors are good for being able to kind of crack it away. And then you can see like that's a little bit right there is probably where the stalk stopped and the crown started. So this is from one individual tuber. I've cut here more because I did nick it with the pitchforks when I was lifting it. But here you can see what I might have taken it down to as little clumps like this. So some of them, you know, just weren't conducive to that. That doesn't have a lot of crown. Is it going to eye up? Maybe not. But I'm definitely going to have lots that will eye up nicely for spring. I also held on to this one like this because I wanted to show it today. You can see we've got a tuber here, and then all of these, and it can be really disappointing when you pull up one that has a few of these on it, and you pull it up and you go, oh my gosh, I have so many tubers, and then you realize that they're just little tubers attached on here, and they will not produce eyes there.
Okay, so a tuber coming off of a tuber like that is unlikely for each of those to develop a new plant.
They're just suckers. So I left it like this just to show, but I will actually just go and nip those all off, and it'll just be those two tubers that will be here for next year.
Okay.
Yeah. So they sit out here for about 24 hours. Something you want to make sure you never do is put them to dry on the concrete. It'll pull the moisture out of them, and it can just ruin them really, really quickly.
And what are you storing them in? Is it is that vermiculite?
It is vermiculite. Mostly the more fine vermiculite, actually, in this one.
Okay, so that's a coarse vermiculite I'm seeing here.
Yeah, and that was all that I could get at one point last season. I got one bag of those last season. So what I'm doing with those is they're getting, with that vermiculite, is I'm putting a lot of these big guys.
Yeah.
That's not going to dry out very easily. And they're going into larger totes, like larger containers with more of the thicker vermiculite. Because I find that some people like it, but I find that it just doesn't get around all the areas nearly as well as you can imagine.
Okay, so then you've dug, you've divided, you've done an initial curing for 24 hours or so until you've got the right moisture level, and then you're putting them into the fine vermiculite.
Yeah, so this is one that I did maybe 10 days ago. So they all go in layered into here. You want none of them touching one another, because if this one starts to rot and have issues and it's touching other ones, that's going to spread through, of course. So this is, if I did a check on it, it looks great. You might notice the vermiculite kind of clump a little bit. That's just that it's picked up a little more moisture, but that's all right. That's with me because it's early in the storage and they need to be in here a while. So that's what they just get tucked in like that. Sometimes, again, different climates. Sometimes people will drill holes in their lids of the containers. And then the other people I know that store in baggies. We want the humidity to be around 75, 85. So I'm not going to worry too much. 72, everything's going to be okay for me with that. When I find I do need to add humidity into the storage area is when it gets really, really snowy outside. That's when you'll see the humidity really start to plummet. The doors have been open lots here with me in and out too. So that is going to influence that a little bit, but that's a fine humidity. When it gets really low, I'm going to start running humidifiers out here to increase it.
Temperature-wise, and I maybe will mention to my American friends that those are Celsius numbers there. Yes. So 12 degrees Celsius is fine. 12 degrees Fahrenheit, maybe not so much.
Not so much.
But you are trying to keep it above freezing.
It definitely, if these freeze, they're done. Garages in Canada, since we are where we are, one of the warmest spots in Canada, I'm going to say all of Canada, garages in Canada can be very tricky. I have lost all of them at an old property in a large garage. So that was rather heartbreaking, but now I'm monitored more closely. I was very excited when we bought this house because it has its own heater in the garage. Something we would have never spent that kind of money on.
Right, so thermostatically controlled backup heat,
yes,
for sure.
Yeah, and you want to have between, the range that they say is between 4 and 10. I find that you'll pull some out if it's consistently 10 degrees. You'll have some that are really eyeing up and you want them to go pretty dormant through the winter. So I usually just set my heat at about 5.
Okay, so nobody likes to advertise if they've found disease in their garden.
Nope.
Not the slightest.
Nope.
However, you
We're
are
gonna be
checking.
real.
you're checking for it when you're pulling these, right?
Yeah. So yesterday I took this one up. This is where hosing them is nice as well because you get to give them a really good inspection. And I saw some concerning areas here. This one in particular, right there. I don't know how well you can get in and see that, Jason, but that
Give me a second. I'm just going to zoom as best I can.
Yeah.
And maybe we can get a macro shot of that as well.
Yeah, maybe follow up with something else. So this is a sign of leafy gull, as it's called, which is a disease that dahlias are prone to. They also get crown gall. How does this happen? Why did I get this? Well, unfortunately, a lot of them are coming in from large farms that produce a lot that aren't able to maybe do the same kind of cleaning practices, and sometimes they're spreading it through that. But we're also seeing a lot of the dahlias that are imported from overseas that are, again, coming from really large farms, and we're able to buy those dahlias in the big box stores. They are really showing up with an awful lot of this disease. And you know, you might get good flowers still and it might grow okay for a little while, but unfortunately it will spread. It will spread through the soil, it'll spread through the bugs on the plants, and that's why this is extra disappointing for me, because I know I'm going to have to keep watching everything, as I do, but I wanted to be candid and say that, you know, I don't know how this showed up with all the things that I do as safely as I do, but it can happen.
But you, as a producer of the tubers and the seller of the tubers, you can't have that in your garden.
No, this is, and I don't recommend anyone does. I know you're going to have quite a few rose people maybe watching this. Crown gall, I know, impacts the roses as well. I don't know about leafy gall though, if you see it, but crown gall can spread to your roses. It can spread to pretty much any of your plants can get it. So you want to get it out of the garden. The best way to eliminate it is to remove the soil. And that's what'll be happening in this bed. I'm fortunate because this was planted in the corner here. The dahlias next to it, even this lovely clump right there, garbage now. I won't be using them. It had quite a bit of annuals here, so those are easy to pull out. It's scabiosa. But I'll need to dig back probably about 3 feet and remove all that soil in the spring. So
well, that's super frustrating. But thanks for showing it, because it's like one of those things you want to keep an eye for.
Yeah.
And this is the reason why you're doing the checking and sanitation that you're doing.
Exactly. And now I know, like, I know I use these flowers, but I also know that the scissors were cleaned between each plant. So
yeah, so it pays to have those good practices all the way through.
Yeah, it makes you feel a lot more confident when you find something like this in the garden, because it is part of the reality. And you know, it might not have come from any other source except a bug that bit another person's plant down the road and came over here, and it's that unfortunate. So we just want to keep monitoring the plants, and I'll really keep an eye on them in the spring as well as I'm eyeing them up, making sure that they all look healthy. Also, it was a really good thing is to keep track of what you grow where. So I'll go through and do videos, and I can go back to my videos and check which plants where, because if I get a plant in the spring that shows up not looking healthy, I don't want to sell or grow the tubers that were neighboring it. So those ones need to go as well. So going back to having that video, or if you like to write it all out, so you can check where they all were and follow up with that is a good idea as well.
Right on. Well, thank you so much for showing us around today, and particularly because I don't do dahlias that much, it's very interesting for me to find out what goes into overwintering them, which I'm sure is a topic that my viewers would be interested in. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I hope everyone enjoys it.